When a small town in rural Alaska is shaken up by a loud bang coming from the forest, Kevin decides to go on a mission to find out what caused it. This eventually leads him to discover a mysterious giant rocket that had recently fallen from the sky. This is already bizarre enough, but then Kevin also discovers that there is something inside the rocket. And this discovery would be much more significant than the rocket itself. On top of the giant rocket, Kevin had discovered a small hatch and he figured he might fit throughout. He debated going in as he figured it could be dangerous. But his curiosity quickly got the better of him and he entered the rocket ship. It was very dark in the rocket ship and Kevin had to use the flashlight on his phone to help him navigate the way. He made his way through narrow spaces and finally found himself in a part of the rocket with a bit more room. And then Kevin saw it. Kevin could not believe his eyes and he was unsure about what he was supposed to do now. He had never expected that he would end up in this situation. But what did Kevin find in the giant rocket? Why was the rocket even here and how did Kevin manage to find it? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. When a small town in rural Alaska got shaken up by a loud explosion coming from deep in the forest one night, people were curious as to whatever caused this, but also too fearful to go and search for the cause. Kevin organized a week-long trip to find out what caused this loud noise. He prepared his equipment and he started meandering the next morning. After a couple of days, Kevin was weary, all alone in the cold. He had started to doubt his decision and he was making thoughts of coming back. Kevin was living a nightmare. The cold was so bad, especially at nights the nippy air made his bones hardened. Not only did the cold keep him awake, but the noise howling of the wolves sniffing around his tent, birds flying and croaking. Kevin didn't know it yet, but he is about to get rewarded for the risk he was taking. Kevin had inspected them closely but was not able to recognize any of them. All he could determine was that they looked expensive, even though they appear to have a lot of damage. We also kept wondering where they could have come from. It was almost like they had fallen from the sky. While he was walking, he found more and more metal parts scattered here and there. He knew that he was closer to the evidence he was looking for all these days. So as he walked, suddenly behind the trees his eyes catch something, but it was difficult to see as the sun reflected the object into his eyes. Kevin just left like this was what he had been looking for ever since he started his expedition into the forest. But even when he got closer, it was still difficult to make out what he was seeing. All he was sure of was that it was absolutely massive. Kevin was now also really curious to explore the rocket, but he had no idea how dangerous it could be for him. After a little thought, he made the decision that was okay to have a better look at the spaceship, since nothing had happened to it after it had crashed down to Earth. It had been here for nearly a week now, and if this thing was set to explode or something for whatever reason, it would have happened by now, he figured. It was a risk Kevin was willing to take, but was it also a risk that Kevin was going to regret? Kevin theorized that maybe the treetops had crushed the fall a bit or that the rocket was built out of such good materials that they could withstand this kind of impact. And then there was another question that kept popping up in the back of Kevin's mind. Kevin wondered if anybody else knew that this rocket was here in the forest. Somebody had to know, right? This thing had to be worth millions of dollars and had only recently landed here. People had to be looking for it, or people should have found it already. But why did they not mention it to the authorities then? He tried to find clues as to whom it may belong on the rocket's exterior. So he looked for the flags of countries or the logos of companies but could find nothing of the sort. After thinking about why this could be the case, and he thinks he has found the reason for it. Kevin was still wondering why this rocket was here specifically. That could not have been the plan, right? It seemed so dangerous to have this crash on land. Did something maybe go wrong? And that is when a real troubling feeling started to creep up on Kevin. Was it possible that somebody was still in there? It's that they had been sent on a mission to space, but that there was a malfunction or something they crashed? Kevin needed to figure this out, and there was only one way he was going to get answers. He knew that the only way he was going to get these answers was as if he actually managed to get into the rocket ship. This was a lot easier said than done, as it was obvious that nobody was supposed to do this. But after a few workarounds, Kevin managed to find a way to get into the rocket. The rocket was still very much sealed off even after the impact on the ground. But after a bit of closely inspecting the machine, Kevin thought that he might have found the weak point he can exploit, but it was not at a place that he expected it to be. A crowbar would be perfect for this, but of course Kevin doesn't just have this in his backpack at the moment. He will have to get creative, but luckily he already has an idea of how to get this done. But that idea is not without risk, and Kevin had taken a lot of that already. There is still a lot of wreckage lying around from the crash, so maybe there was something that he could use. Kevin has to find a piece that is long and strong enough to not break when he puts a lot of pressure on it. And it didn't take long before he had it. A long steel pipe fits just about in the bent open part of the hole. Kevin got himself in position and started putting as much weight on the end of the pipe as possible, and bang. This was the moment that Kevin started feeling some nerves coming up. Only an hour ago, he was still just looking for something out of the ordinary in the forest, and now he was about to enter a crashed rocket. Was he being stupid by doing this? Most likely, but he had gotten too far in to stop now. He carefully made his way through the small doorpost into a just as small shaft seemingly leading in the direction of the top of the rocket ship. This was not going to be easy. How could he get inside the rocket properly without falling? Kevin had a lot of difficulties getting through the shaft. It was probably a bit more spacious in the original design of the rocket, but was completely smushed by the impact, and the occasional sharp points sticking out of the wall also didn't make the crawl any easier. Luckily, this door was not locked. Nobody probably expected anybody to get through the first door. Kevin squeezed himself through the small hole and finally got into a larger room. This is what he was looking for. He was amazed with what he saw. There was what like some sort of control center. It was a lot smaller than he had expected for a rocket ship, and there was not even a seat. Has someone really been launched to space in this? And if so, how did the astronaut live in this rocket? Kevin got increasingly curious about everything. Kevin quickly grabbed his phone but realized that he had no signal here whatsoever. The walls of this rocket must not be very accommodating to phone frequencies. Sadly, Kevin had to leave the rocket to look at his phone, but how could he memorize what he found in the plane? He took a quick look around and grabbed the plate with the name and model number out of the control centrum. This way he would not forget it and he had something to remind him of this crazy day. After that, he got out of the rocket to check his phone. He just needed to look this up now, so he quickly Googled the model of the rocket. It took a long time for the information to load in, seeing as Kevin still found himself in the middle of an Alaskan forest. The images that eventually loaded in showed the rocket Kevin was standing in. And apparently, this was a very common rocket. Apparently, this rocket was not used to transport people to space, but satellites. There was never supposed to be anybody in this thing besides perfecting the settings. Kevin could not believe what he read, but he read even more strange things. According to what he was reading online, these rockets often disappeared into the sea and were designed to cause as little as possible harm there. But of course, when one landed on land, it would have very different consequences. On his back to the town, Kevin made a call to the local government to report his find with the precise location of it, and they would try to get this information to the right person and thanked Kevin for his help. Kevin was curious. Would he ever hear anything more from the authorities about this rocket again? Days later, Kevin got a call from a representative from the actual US government to ask him if he had been in the rocket. Kevin thought about it, but eventually decided to be honest. He got an answer that he did not expect. This was luckily appreciated and was not a big deal unless he significantly vandalized the rocket. This was not the case, of course, and as a thank you for finding the rocket, Kevin got a decent financial reward as a thank you.